Welcome to the Fight Cancer with Dr. Prasad podcast, your source for the latest, most reliable, and research based information about cancers and their treatments. Hello, I'm your host, Dr. Prasad Raj. I'm an oncologist and I head the radiation oncology department at Sir H.N. Reliance Foundation Hospital in Mumbai. One of the common questions that I get in my clinic from patients is, will my children get cancers if I have cancer? And especially if I see breast cancer patients, they are very worried that they are concerned about, is this cancer genetic or hereditary? And we have the perfect guest to answer all these questions for us. We have Professor Dr. Rajiv Sarin with us, who heads the Genetic Cancer Clinic, which he has been running for more than 2 decades at Tata Memorial Center, and he's a radiation oncologist at Tata Memorial Center as well. Welcome, Dr. Sarin.
Hello. Hello, Doctor.
But one of the most important identity of Dr. Sarin is the relentless teacher that he has been for last 25 years. This year we celebrated his 25th year as a teacher, and I have been a very proud student of Dr. Sarin. I was his third MD student.
Okay.
Dr. Sarin has been the compass for many of us, including me, to find our true north. So thank you very much, Dr. Sarin, for all the work that you have done for all of us.
Thank you, Prasad. Thank you.
So, Dr. Sarin, this question that whether my cancer is genetic or not is such a delicate question that comes from the patients that it really was one of the reasons why I said, let me have this conversation with you. But I'm curious, you were the radiation oncologist, you had studied in UK, you came back to Tata, and then how did you suddenly get into genetics? I mean, it's not a natural transition to happen.
Yeah, I think it's a important question because there are some lessons for me as well as others who are in that stage of their career. So, like you, I did my MD from Tata Hospital in 92. I went to England. There's a cancer hospital there called Royal Marsden Hospital. I spent 4 or 5 years, came back, joined as a consultant in Tata Hospital in 96. What I realized is that previously I used to get maybe one odd case of a hereditary type of cancer when there are many people affected with cancer once in few months. Now suddenly every week I was seeing a family which has strong family history of cancer. And then what I realized that in the last 4 or 5 years, what had changed the way I was taking history, the way I was talking to rather than the way I was listening to patients. And I think that was the only clue. And then I thought, okay, so in India also, hereditary cancer is not as rare as I used to think. It is more common. And then initially it was my research interest. I think, all new consultants always think of having a research portfolio. I thought this will be my research portfolio. But it was 1996, the BRCA genes had just been found out, BRCA1 and BRCA2. There was not a single lab in India that was doing genetic testing, any kind of germline genetic testing. I started talking to patients and at least taking down their family history, the details of that. Used to call them in my lunchtime because it takes time to do that. And people used to ask me, curious, why do you do this? I had just come back from England with that degree and everything else. So I said, I like it. And then after a year or two, I realized I've bitten more than I can chew. It is really difficult. They used to ask, what should I do for my daughter? What shall I do for my, sister? And I had no clue because I was not trained in this. And then I tried to escape. But these families, they would just not leave me. So the first 100 odd families whom I had shown research interest, they caught on to me. I was like a check review, I got trapped into it. I could not come out of it. And then one day I started thinking like a doctor, well, these families need help. And there is no one else I could refer them to. There was not a single lab in the country. There was one Myriad Genetics in the US. They used to charge even then $3,000. Someone will have to sell their home to do a genetic test. So that is when I taught myself, I read, I did some courses, and that's we started in 2003. So my lunchtime clinic used to be registry into 1996. Then when you were there at the Tata Hospital, you would have seen some of these families. I used to sit with them for an hour and take the family history. 2003, we started once a week genetics clinic, and 2007 with genetic counselors I hired, appointed full time. We had a daily cancer genetics clinic, and now we have become so busy. What used to be my lunchtime clinic, I have a team of 15 cancer genetic counselors. And more often than not, they don't have time to have lunch. At 3 or 4, they order some food and then they have food. So this is what has happened.
Yeah, I mean that also speaks about not just your work, but entire scale of the problem that we need to do. And even in the city of Mumbai, your clinic is the only clinic which is sort of doing this. Even in Mumbai, we don't have other options. So it's a big.
Unfortunately, in most of the India, there's hardly few. But the good thing is now some hospitals have started in a small measure, with some
Yeah.
genetic counselor or something else. But it is just basically scratching the surface.
Yeah. Dr. Sarin, you mentioned about BRCA genes, but before we delve into the depths of genes and BRCA genes, I think it would help if you sort of decipher what is a gene, what is a mutation, what happens in these patients' bodies.
Okay, so I'll tell you how I talk to my patient. So when they come, someone is referred for a genetic test. So before the testing, because this is different from other CBC test or other tests, because we will come to know about the genes, about the genetic makeup, whether the gene has any alteration or a mutation, whether it can be passed on. So we do what we call as a pre-test genetic counseling. So before the test, we explain to them what we will do, why we are doing it, what could be the results, and how it will be used for you and for the family. So I start with actually most people know. See, if you ask about hereditary, anyone with a common sense or they would have just realized that many things run in the family. It is not just the wealth you inherit many other things, your height, your color of your skin, your eyes, and so many other disease risks also. So this is common knowledge. People understand that many physical traits, mental abilities, as well as health risks can be passed on through generation. And this people have known for, more than a millennium. The why that is passed on, there was a Austrian monk known Mendel. Okay, more than 150 years ago, he experimented with pea plants. So the different pea plants have different properties. So the pods, they could be shriveled, they could be round, different colors, different heights, and through that he deduced that the traits, physical traits, and he was obviously looking for physical traits in the pea plant. He figured out that it is contributed by, he used to do, crossbreeding experiments. He figured out that there are dominant traits, there are recessive traits. They are passed on from the parents. Here they were the pea plants. And today we know that even in humans and all living, these are known as Mendelian genetics. So that means something from the parents is passed on to the children, and that could determine their physical traits, their some of their behavioral traits, as well as disease risk. But what it is, that was known much later, because initially we knew that they are cells. So there was a scientist, he showed that there are cells, first shown cork cells. And then we show in the cell there is a nucleus, like in the egg, you have the egg yolk, there's a nucleus in the cell. And in that nucleus, humans have 23 pair of chromosomes. Chromosome means colored, so under special staining they take up color, so chromosomes. And when I said pair of chromosomes, because one you get from mother, one from father, and these chromosomes are numbered 1 to 22. And then one pair of chromosome, what we call sex chromosome, which you get one from mother, one from father. So mother has XX chromosome, from mother you get only X, father has X and Y. So father can pass on either X or Y. If father passes on X, the daughter is born. Father passes on Y, then a son is born. These chromosomes are long like threads which have been coiled tightly, they are packed, and they are made up of a chemical, special chemical of life known as DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and stretches of these DNA make up genes. Genes make proteins and they do the function. Like you would have heard, there's insulin. Insulin is a protein, there's a gene for that. Albumin has a gene for that. Everything. So there are 20,000, more than 20,000 genes which code for different proteins in every cell of the body. These genes are expressed. All the genes, you won't ask why you need 20,000 genes, because from the time the life is formed, like from an embryo to the time we die, different genes in different organs are required to express or to be suppressed. So that is why you require so many genes, and that is a gene. And now what talking about disease, each gene normally there has some variation. You would never ever seen two people who look like spitting image. If you see them, you will say these are monozygotic or identical twin. And that only happens once an embryo is formed and then it splits into two. So the genetic material is 100% same. Any two human beings who are not monozygotic or identical twin, they would have tens of thousands of places where in 1% DNA have four letters, A, T, G, C, it is C, someone else would have G, someone else would have A. So these variation gives rise to the population diversity, different physical traits, behavioral traits, And sometimes these changes are such that they do not allow the protein to function normally. And then depending what the function of the gene is, a related disease can develop. And because it is related to a gene, we call it genetic. And anything that is in the genes can be passed on to the next generation. That's why it could be hereditary.
And when we speak about mutations, so you spoke to us about what is a gene and how do they get transmitted. But we do see mutations where things, dramatically change. So are these accidents or are these sort of a part of natural process?
Okay. So it's an important question. How do they happen? So because there are 3 billion bases, in our DNA, in one human cell, 3 billion bases. Like in any printing press, when you're making copies, there could be some typos. So there is a natural, for every million bases, there is one error which could happen. So the body, the cellular mechanism has mechanisms to take care of this, but every change or alteration is not necessarily corrected. So as a result, we get a lot of changes, and vast majority of these changes are harmless and they do not cause any change. I mean, we are all like, handcrafted individuals. That's why we are all alike. If no one is alike, except monozygotic twins. But only rarely the change is at a particular place where it does not allow the protein to function, or it causes a major problem in the function of that protein, and then it causes, that's what we call a mutation. So in pure sense we call it as a variation, and then we have to see this variation is a known common variation which happens just make someone's eyes blue, someone's green, someone's black, or hair curly or straight. That is also because of gene variation. Or it's a gene variation which alone doesn't do anything, but with a combination of 30, 40, 50 other gene variation, it might increase your risk for developing blood pressure or something else. Or it's a gene variation when only in this gene, if just this change happens, then your risk for a disease like say cancer, breast cancer, which goes up from say 3-4% to 80-90%. So there are different kinds of gene variation. That's why specialists are needed to look at in which gene what change has happened, and then make interpretation and give advice accordingly.
Yeah. So these are actually what we spoke about, the genes which are the genetics which are also influencing our phenotype, or
That's true.
how we look, how we behave, how we think, everything. So in real sense, if I was thinking, it's like it is our true kundali.
Yes,
It is
because
written for us,
yeah,
and it
because
is
yeah,
almost set in stone. Although there will be some variation,
yeah,
and those will be the mutations
yeah.
which may happen, and they will again change how our life
That is
is
true. That is true.
going. So you spoke about
On
BRCA
that, I just
genes.
want to add one thing, Prasad. So there is something known as, this is our genetic makeup, then there's environment. So there's something known as gene environment interaction. So there's certain things which are purely environment. Like someone is not given vitamin C for 8 months or 9 months, no matter what the genes are, or someone falls from the height of say 100 feet, no matter what your genes are, you will have fracture or rickets, whichever it is. So it has nothing to do with the genes. On the other hand, there are some diseases which are entirely genetic, like Down syndrome or some other diseases. So purely genetic. But a lot of human traits and diseases, it's a mix of your genetic makeup and the environment. So what we call nature versus nurture theory.
Yeah. And the role of epigenetics is also now coming up, and we are probably understanding these interactions of our genes and our environment also better, because I think there's a lot of data available on people moving from one country to another country, and how their diseases are changing and how their bodies are changing. So Indians who went from India to, say, for example, US, they are developing different types of diseases than the Indians in India are developing, and that's a fascinating branch again to look at from cancer point of view and other diseases point of view also.
So that's interesting, Indians. So there's data for breast cancer from about Indians and some other communities like Japanese. Japanese, they have Issei or Nisei. So which generation when they went to and settled in the North America. Indians, so we have 4 groups of Indians. Indians who live in rural India, so their lifestyle is different. Indians who live in small or mid-sized cities, Indians who live in metropolitan cities, and Indians who are second generation or born in North America, who lived there. So although they all have the Indian genes, the same set of genes, they all say we have Indian lifestyle, but we know the lifestyle changes. With each transition in lifestyle, the risk of breast cancer increases. And like in rural India, the risk of breast cancer, how we describe is age standardized rates per 100,000 women is around 10. In Mumbai, it is about three times higher, around 30 per 100,000. And Indians who were born, females I'm talking about, who were born and brought up in US, no matter what they say, what they eat, but their risk is very close to the rates of white women or Caucasian women in North America. It's almost 80 to 90 per 100,000. So this brings about the importance of change in lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah. And you alluded to BRCA genes earlier and the discovery of BRCA genes, which really changed the way we look at cancers. And it not only breast cancer, but it really opened those doors for so many cancers. And now it has also impact on the treatment of breast cancer. So why don't you tell us a little bit about BRCA and its fascinating story?
So BRCA stands for BR for breast, CA for cancer. And one is because the first gene which was found was called BRCA1. And a year later, that was, in England, the BRCA2 gene was found. It was the second gene. And this also does not explain all cases of hereditary breast cancer. Then there's a long list of other genes which can, explain that why someone has breast cancer in the family. Actually, BRCA term is little a misnomer because it doesn't cause the risk for only breast cancer. It increases the risk for, in women, increased risk of ovary cancer, and in men increases the risk for prostate cancer and some other cancers. So it is not just breast cancer, but some other cancers, what we call BRCA1 or BRCA2 associated cancers, pancreatic cancer and few other cancers. In India, we see a lot of food pipe cancers also because of the BRCA2 mutation. So there's a list of cancers, the risk. So what we see is what is the population risk. I just explained to you before about the risk of cancer, breast cancer in Indian women. Say it is 30 per 100,000. So if it translates into lifetime risk, it's about 1 in 25 women, or 3 or 4% of women, Indian women, if they live till the age of 75 or 80, will develop breast cancer. So this is a population risk. But when they are born, and if they are born with mutation in a BRCA1 gene, then this 4% risk will go up to anywhere from 70 to 80%. So you become from population risk to very high risk. But that doesn't mean that you're certainly going to get. So same way for ovary cancer, the risk goes up from otherwise population risk of ovary cancer around 1%, that goes to 30 to 40%. Population risk of prostate cancer in Indian men is around 1 to 2%, that goes to around 15% for BRCA1, 25% for BRCA2. Pancreatic cancer, fortunately, is otherwise very rare, but if someone has a BRCA2 mutation, about 10% of them develop pancreatic cancer. With BRCA1, maybe 2 to 5%. Then one more, men sometimes think that they can never get breast cancer. Okay, so something called as male breast cancer. Otherwise, breast cancer in males is very rare, maybe 1 in 1,000 or 1 in, less than that. But if they have a mutation in the BRCA1, maybe 1 in 20 or 1 in 10 may develop male breast cancer. If it is BRCA2, little less, maybe 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 may develop male breast cancer. These are the risks. No, now a lot of data, studies which have done. So today, 30 years, more than 30 years since BRCA1 and BRCA2 were discovered of first time, people always knew cancer and in the families. I mean, these families knew, they didn't have to ask any doctor. They had seen so many cancers. The doctors came to know, or scientists came to know the gene which causes this only about 30 years ago. And now we have thousands of families in which we have figured out what is the risk with different ages in males and females.
Yeah, I mean, these families have really sometimes heartbreaking stories, and we as doctors sort of started learning about it. And this is a beautiful case where the doctors actually learn from our patients, that we start seeing these patterns in what is happening in these families. I think BRCA became very popular, or rather unpopular, in the common population when Angelina Jolie sort of declared that she has the BRCA gene, and then she had the surgery. And I think this was around 8 or 10 years ago, and that sort of created a lot of discussion. And when a celebrity sort of discloses these sort of health issues, in a way, I think it's a very positive impact because it creates so much awareness. because lot of people suddenly were aware about BRCA genes, and then this conversation started happening. And also around the same time in India, we started having labs which were able to do these tests, and the tests became very much cheaper. So that was a sort of a good positive outcome that came out of Angelina Jolie. But the conversations around these patients are very difficult. I mean, I had a patient last week. She is in her early 40s, has breast cancer. Her mother had breast cancer, and grandmother, she said, I'm not aware. So she's sort of just two family people in family history of breast cancer, and now she has a young daughter. And she was so worried as to, should I do the BRCA test? What will happen if I do the BRCA test? And there was so much fear around that. I'm sure you would be seeing these sorts of patients as well, very, very routinely in your clinic.
So, Prasad, you very rightly pointed out, and we have a lot of experience with these families. We have done some studies also. So, what we call these psychosocial aspects of genetic counseling and genetic testing. There's a term known as LC, ethical, legal, and social implications. So, first of all, cancer itself in our country and many other societies, it's a taboo. And then on top of it, if you say it will run in the families, then it becomes even a bigger problem. And a bigger problem, and people don't want in India, marriage is a big thing. For parents, one of the big thing is that their daughters and sons, most of their daughters, that they're married in time, married to the right person, right family, etc., etc. And most people marry within the community, within their caste or community, where a lot of people know each other. You know how the matchmaking happens in India. So I'll, whenever like you describe this lady of yours, so if we do her testing and suppose we find that she has a mutation and she's a 25-year-old daughter. So I have had many such situations. So if I ask, half the time parents are thinking whether to get tested, their daughter get tested or not. And one of the reason why they are thinking of not to get their daughter tested is in case she's found to have a BRCA mutation, what additional issues it might pose in terms of their marriageability and issues, what will they tell the in-laws, etc., etc. On the other hand, when I talk to these young women who are in their 20s, 30s, out of 100 odd I've spoken to, I remember only one lady, she said she doesn't want to get tested, and the reason for her was different. There was some exam or something else, or other personal reason. But almost everyone said that no, we want to get tested. Of course, marriage is important now. Mothers pay too much attention to that, but I want to know whether I have the risk or not. And earlier, 30 years ago, just if someone had a family history, strong family history, everyone else in the family, women would say, well, you have a very high chance. Today, because genes are in pairs, BRCA1 gene is in chromosome 17, BRCA2 is in chromosome 13. Only one copy is mutated in her mother or whoever else. There's a 50-50 chance the daughter will inherit the mutated copy or the normal copy. So by doing genetic testing, we can tell whether that daughter or that sister or son has actually inherited the mutation from the family or has inherited the normal copy. So half the times that sort of burden on the head that is lifted off, that is one thing. So that young lady says, well, maybe I'm hoping I'm not inheriting the mutation. I won't have to bother about it. And if I have the mutation, then doctor, whatever you advise, I will follow those precautions, prevention, etc. So that becomes very important. So that is universal. And we did a little survey. About one third of the women had not disclosed even in their family, sometimes even with their sibling, that they have a germline mutation. And the reason was, if she'll tell her sister will tell her husband, her sister's husband will tell his mother, she will tell someone else, and in matter of few years, there'll be hundreds of people in their community who would know that in this family there is genetic, it causes problems. So we counsel them, we explain to them, we ask for extended family testing. I'll just address about the Angelina Jolie. So two things. So one very good thing was increase the awareness so much. People suddenly, I gave sort of interviews so many places. The other thing was many women started thinking if they are found to have a BRCA mutation, that means they'll have to do the operation what Jolie did, like removing the healthy breasts and ovaries. So what I tell them, please remember what she wrote in her, op-ed. She said, "My choices." You make a choice only if you have an option. So she opted for doing preventive mastectomy. There's an option of doing screening also. So at the right appropriate time and age, we can opt either for either screening only or for preventive surgery. So it is not mandatory. That means if you have a mutation, you have to undergo the knife.
Yeah. But what are the options that these patients have? I mean, we spoke about surgeries, and there are so many, as you mentioned, ethical things around it. What is the age of the patient? Is this surgery even feasible? If it is a young person and there's a high risk of ovarian cancer, then what do we do? So, what are the realistic options if patients with BRCA1 and 2 positivity?
So again, for this, there is not one thing. So basically, we look at what is the person's age, okay? What is the person's sex? What is the risk of cancer, whether they're healthy as of now or they already have developed cancer? What is the family history? And then we know by which cancer, like breast cancer risk starts in early 20s. And between the age of 20 and 30, about say 10% develop breast cancer. Between the age of 30 and 40, another 30% develop breast cancer. Between the age of 40 and 50, another 20. And then between the age of 50 and 65 or 70, around 20% develop. And around 20 to 30% will never develop breast cancer. Suppose there is a 35-year-old lady who's already married, has completed her family. We will deal with her in a different way. My advice to her would be very different. Whereas a 33-year-old lawyer or a chartered accountant who's still thinking about marriage and not this thing, my approach to her would be very different. So, age, whether they wish to get married or not, what is happening, whether they have completed family. Some people don't want to have children, biological children. So, taking everything into account, it is individualized. There's no one formula which will fit everyone. So I think that's what people who are thinking of testing or have found to have a mutation, don't just read this thing that if you have a BRCA mutation, you have to do this, you have to do this. There are several options which in the process of genetic counseling, first, that's why we do a pre-test genetic counseling. We know you, we know you, about your family, what are your plans, what are your wishes, what is something which you definitely don't want, what is something you are okay to have it, and then accordingly we give them advice. So it is a highly individualized process.
Yeah, I think one of the concern that I also have is the tendency of the oncologist now to just prescribe do BRCA test,
Yeah.
and I find it very difficult to deal with. And I have seen patients who were advised BRCA test by their surgical or medical oncologist, and then they have come to me for their radiation or they are on follow up, and many of them are an emotional wreck because nobody has actually made them sit down and understand that what are the implication of doing the test itself. What you need to be ready to receive those reports, and then you need to act on those. So I think that is very important, that we need patients to go and see genetic counselors, get properly counseled, and only then they will choose whether they should go for the test or not, and then figure out what's
I think you
happening.
have rightly said what has happened in the last few years started with ovarian cancer. Now the recommendations are that anyone who has ovarian cancer, especially the most common type of ovarian cancer, what we call serous ovarian cancer, high grade serous ovarian cancers, more than 70-80% of all ovarian cancer of that type, irrespective of age and family history, you should have BRCA1, BRCA2, and some other genes tested. For breast cancer also, all triple negative breast cancer, all many other conditions where you have family history of cancer in both breast or breast and ovary, you should have BRCA test. So, and the reason why it is because there's a targeted therapy. Like for BRCA gene mutation, there's a drug known as, it's a tablet, olaparib or some other kinds of PARP inhibitors that can improve the chances of cure. Or the cancer is already spread, it's stage 4 cancer, it can increase the lifespan or quality of life. So for treatment point of view, doctors are advising many times, but if you get a result which show that it is inherited form of BRCA mutation, then it opens up a Pandora's box. So there is a movement known as mainstreaming of genetic testing, because most genetics clinic cannot handle. Our genetics clinic, you won't believe it, every year, last year we saw 3,000 new families. It's like any other, and this year probably 4,000 new families will be seeing. But I have a team of 15 genetic counselors, which includes trainee genetic counselors. So somehow we are keeping, and most hospitals do not have, even if they want to refer to genetics clinic, they aren't genetics clinic, enough genetics clinic. So in the mainstreaming of genetic testing, the doctors, oncologists learn what are the main frequently asked questions. What is something they have to tell the patient? It should not be that the finding that the germline BRCA mutation comes as a surprise, and tell them what will be the condition. If suppose genetic testing done, nothing has been found, and there was no family history, there was no concern by that person about risk to the family, then maybe a doctor can do negative test. They can tell we did the test, nothing was found. Chapter closes. But in case if the patient has a family history or genetic testing find there is a mutation or genetic testing find there is an uncertain change, variant of uncertain significance, or the person, irrespective of all this, has concerns about their family members, they should certainly be seen by experts in cancer genetics, what we call cancer genetics clinic, if it is not possible to each and every patient to be referred to the cancer genetics clinic. So ideally everyone, if not everyone, at least these patients should be seen by the cancer genetics clinic before and after the genetic test.
Yeah. You also mentioned that BRCA1 and 2 are actually just one of the genes which mutate and cause this cancer, and there's a plethora of other genes which can also, like P53 and so many others. So when we do the genetic test, do you recommend all the genes, relevant genes, be tested, or do you do focused testing depending on the condition that the patient is going through?
So traditionally, when it started, they were testing only BRCA1 and 2 gene by a method known as Sanger sequencing, okay, and MLPA. And but now what we do is we have data to show that our own data, we have 5,000 families with either breast or ovary cancer. And what we have found in them, we have found a gene mutation in BRCA1 and 2 in more than 1,000 families. That what we find that in breast cancer patients, if we tested only BRCA1 and 2, we will miss out a gene mutation in about 1/4 of the patients. That means if 100 patients have an underlying genetic, gene mutation which has caused their cancer, in 75% it is because of BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene, and 25% because of some other genes which we would not have known if we had not tested other genes. For ovarian cancer, 85% are because of BRCA1 and 2 genes, and 15% are because of other genes. So that's why in today's day and age, we do the genetic testing by a method known as next generation sequencing. So this is more powerful. It allows us to test many more genes, 20 genes, 30 genes, 100 genes at one go, almost at the same price. So that allows us to look at it. But the more genes you test, you may more some of these genes, the cancer risks are not as high as I described for BRCA1 and 2. Plus for some of the genes, because they are just thrown in, because you're testing all the genes, let us test this gene because it was shown in one research paper, their cancer risks are uncertain also. So that makes counseling a little challenging. So some doctors do not want to get into these issues of counseling for genes about which they or scientific community doesn't know very well. So that is the reason. And sometimes those tests, the prices also increase a little bit, maybe 10-20%. So because of that reason, many doctors still do not do what we call multi-gene panel testing. But I think in this day and age, for at least for breast cancer, it should always be a multi-gene panel testing of at least 15 to 30 genes. And for ovarian cancer, if you're doing only BRCA1 and 2, if the test is negative and the family history or something else, then you should certainly ask for a larger panel. Even to begin with, I think larger panel is better.
Yeah, and ovarian cancer compared to breast cancer is far more, serious, sort of a more aggressive tumor, very difficult to treat and control. So breast cancer comparatively is much easier to manage. We spoke about patients with family histories and gene mutations, but very often we see patients who actually don't have any family history or have sort of a scattered history. Like father was a tobacco chewer, he had a tongue cancer, now this lady has breast cancer, or an uncle had, say, rectal cancer and something. And they are worried because there may be one or two members in the family who had this cancer. And their question is, should we get tested? Because they're not only afraid of what will happen to them, but they've also seen their family members go through the treatment, and maybe that was long ago and it was quite, quite problematic for that person to take the treatment. So there's a lot of fear associated when you have family history of cancer, but there's no specific genetic link. So what do we do in these patients?
So, It's a very pertinent question for people to know and doctors to also realize. Doctors have understood now, but lay people still haven't sort of understood. When you say hereditary cancer, that means lots of cancers in the family, mother, sister, aunt, everyone have. That is not always true. If 100 women find BRCA1 mutation with breast cancer, only about 20 or 30% would have a strong family history. Where just by looking at the family history, personal and family history, I would have been almost sure that this is because of genetic type. In the remaining two-thirds, either there is no family history or the family history there but not as strong. And there are two, three reasons for that. Why we don't always get strong family history. First and foremost, half the times it is coming from the father's side. Okay, people think breast cancer means be coming from the mother side. So half the time it is coming from father side. And in males, if you just now I talked about it, in males with a BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation, only about 15 to 20% develop cancer, remaining 80% will remain healthy carriers, but they can pass on the risk. So your father would not have cancer, but their daughter may develop. So very, very typical, you get your father that I am a 35-year-old lady with breast cancer. My father is healthy. My father's brother is healthy, but my father's brother's daughter has also developed ovarian cancer as of 38. So it looks like they're two cousins. So they are, not directly in this thing, but the two brothers were the carriers of this. And their grandmother may have had breast cancer, paternal grandmother, Ajit. So that happens. Plus, even in women, so as I said, mothers also, that can be coming from mother's side. 20 to 30% women who have a BRCA mutation will not have breast or ovarian cancer. So the mother may have the mutation but may not have developed as yet. We have many families where the daughter was first diagnosed with cancer, and later on, a year or two later, the mother also said, "Oh, I also have breast lump," and then she went and did a mammogram and was found to have cancer. So this plus many other syndromes are also there. So that's why today we don't go only by strong family history. That was a traditional approach of finding gene mutation, but now there are criteria. So either a family history or someone develops cancer at a younger age. Each cancer has a typical age, like for colorectal cancer, for breast cancer, for sarcomas. Every cancer has a typical age at which they are diagnosed. If someone has got at a younger age, then it is a red flag that maybe it is genetic type. Someone has got cancer in both sides. Suppose they are paired organ like breast, kidneys, eyes, lung. If it is in both sides are involved, that is again a red flag. Maybe it is hereditary. Someone has multicentric, that means in the same organ, two, three different primary tumors, and that could also be a red flag. It could be hereditary. And obviously, family history I have mentioned. And sometimes these days, the pathologist, when they look under the microscope, they do some special test like immunohistochemistry or something else, like for colorectal cancer. So there are some protein markers, if they are not expressed, what we call MMR deficient. So a pathologist can suspect maybe this person's cancer is of the hereditary type or some other features like triple negative breast cancer where ER, PR, HER2, all three are not expressed. Then based on this itself, irrespective of anything else, it is a red flag to rule out an inherited basis or an underlying gene mutation.
Yeah. I recently had a patient where we were treating the mother and daughter together. And it was really heartbreaking.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it
it
was
is
really
tough.
difficult to sort of, even for us as a team, it was
Yeah.
so difficult to deal with them. They were just few weeks apart from each other. So mother's radiation completed and the daughter's started. It was really sad. I recently had a carpenter who had come home and आप क्या करते हैं सर, आप डॉक्टर हैं क्या? And then I said, हाँ, मैं कौन सा डॉक्टर,
Yeah.
कैंसर का डॉक्टर?
Yeah.
And then he told me that his father, his chacha, uncle, and his grandfather, all had colon cancer. And this is a young man, probably in early 30s.
Yeah.
And I was like, have you got any tests done? So he said, no, I haven't had any tests done. And I, at that point, recommended that maybe he should, visit genetic cancer clinic in Tata Hospital and get himself tested. But I don't think he was sort of convinced.
Yeah.
He came back later again for some other work. I checked with him. He said, "हाँ sir, करता हूँ." Difficult, situations here. And this is a gentleman who also has limited means.
Yes.
So he is not a candidate whom I can say, okay, no, you need to do every 6 monthly colonoscopy,
Yeah. Yeah.
do an endoscopy into your large intestine to see if there is any cancer. So, what do we do for such patients?
So this is a very, difficult situation for us because of cost of genetic testing. No matter how much we try to improvise upon it, the cost of genetic testing would be at least, like in Tata Hospital, we can, for poor patient, we can do it for 7,000 or 14,000. But in general, in private labs, anywhere from, 18 to 25,000, even more. Even for our private patients, it is more. This is more expensive test. But what has happened, I'll have a similar situation. So, people, genetics means it is passed on from one generation to other. Until recently, people in India marry within their own, not only their region and religion, but caste and subcaste and community. So, mutations occur at random also sometimes. If suppose 1,000 years ago, one person had mutation in a gene, and because that person, before he died, he married someone else from his own community or caste, and out of the six children, three had mutation, three did not have mutation. After 30 or 40 generations, there will be few thousand individuals today who will be inheriting that mutation, what is known as a founder mutation. So sometimes in those, if someone cannot test all the genes by next gen sequencing, if we know that this person is from this region or this caste or this group, we can check for specific mutations which are more common in that community or caste or region. And I have a recent example, a colon cancer patient. His mother had colon cancer, his sister died of colon cancer, mother died of uterus cancer, and now he has got early onset, young, he's now in his 40s, he has got colon cancer, and he has three adult children. Now, there's no way he can afford genetic testing, and we have some funds to support, provide free genetic testing, but that is for women, okay, through a separate schemes, but not for men. What do I do for this man? Okay, so what we did is we checked for the mutations which are common in his community, and I found the mutation. So in 450 rupees, I could identify the mutation, and that not only for him, but for the rest. Of course, he will not be able to afford immunotherapy based on that MSH2 mutation if it is required. But for other members in the family, there are at least 15, 20 people in the family. And what I said, you send everyone sample. We will either do it only for 1500 rupees or we will do it for free. So what happened earlier in his family should not happen again in future with others in the family. So when I find a mutation, I've talked to these in the post-test counseling session. I tell them, I'm your family doctor. It is not what has happened in your family that is past. That should not happen in future. You should not develop additional cancers because of this gene mutation. Your treatment should be optimized based on this gene mutation, and at least in future we find out who is at risk, who is not at risk, and those who are not at risk, they don't have to just, they lead a healthy normal lifestyle, and those who are at risk, they follow our advice to see that either cancer is prevented or is detected at stage 1 or stage 0, which is completely curable.
Yeah, and in Tata Hospital, of course, we have preventive cancer clinic also available.
Yeah.
So patients who need, they can go.
Yeah.
Suppose somebody does not
Yeah.
have the means to
Yeah.
go
So
and
they
have
could,
repeatedly mammography.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
screening. So that is not
yeah,
trivial,
first.
lifelong screening, but some of them who have seen so much of cancers and cancer deaths in the family, we don't have to explain to them what cancer is. They know it more than a doctor. What, they have seen from the time of diagnosis till the last, what has happened. And I'll just tell one point in this. The What is the power of knowing that you have not inherited the mutation? That could be so profound. I just few years ago, I had a lady. She lives in Singapore, I think. She came. She had given a blood sample for testing. Her mother was having a BRCA1 mutation. She came. She gave a blood sample for testing. But when she came, her mother was terminally ill. Her mother passed away before going back abroad. She came to collect her report, and we told her that she had not inherited the mutation. So her reaction, what I remember, she said, "Oh, I should have come earlier to collect my report. My mother would have died in peace, knowing that she had not passed on the mutation to me." Okay, so that is, that is one another lady who's unfortunately no more. She had a mutation in a gene known as P53, TP53. While she was battling stage 4 breast cancer and then sarcoma and other things, both her children were tested and both of them had not inherited the mutation. Again, 50-50 chance. So she was so happy that whatever has happened to me, I mean, you can't sort of undo that, but at least my children will not have the same thing what I'm going through. So I think the power of a negative genetic test report in a family which has seen a lot of cancers and a gene mutation is found is also profound for everyone, not just those in who are tested, but others who know that yes, my sister and my daughter has not inherited the mutation.
No, I think that's one big reason why we need to focus on genetic testing, genetic counseling, and also making oncologists also aware. And you do a lot of work on that also. You conduct so many courses and conferences, so that's really helping our patients as well. So you started off by telling us how a cell, then gene, and then chromosomes and mutations and the impact that it has had on patients' lives, a real impact
Yeah.
on the treatment also, like olaparib. Where do we go from here? What's the future like?
I think there are three aspects. Technology is evolving. It will keep on evolving. I don't see that the sudden major this thing. The cost will reduce a little bit of genetic testing, but not drastically. I don't see that. Right now, only few of the gene mutations we can target. Like one is for BRCA mutation, and there's similar kind of gene known as homologous recombination repair pathway (HRR pathway) by drugs known as PARP inhibitors. Then those who have mutation in mismatch repair genes called Lynch syndrome, colorectal cancer, uterine cancer, and other cancers, immunotherapy works in them much better. And few other such examples are there, like for a VHL gene or SDH gene. But for many of these genes, we know what is causing the cancer, what is driving the cancer. But targeted therapy, targeting that is a work in progress. But a lot of research is going on. Hopefully, in the next 5 to 10 years, for many of these genes, we will know not only find the cause why you got cancer, why others in the family had cancer, and prevent cancers in others, but also treat the cancer better with better chance of cure and control of disease. So that is one thing in future which is happening. Many more people would be tested. That is inevitable. The counseling is not really matching up, with that, because first of all, there's lack of genetic counselors in India. There are very few genetic counselors, and whosoever they are, majority of them, they do counseling for other hereditary disorders like congenital, problems, pediatric, conditions, pediatric hereditary conditions, inborn errors of metabolism, thalassemia, recurrent miscarriages. But for cancer genetic counseling, there are very few people who are trained in cancer genetic counseling. So at Tata Hospital, we've started last year a course. Every year we are training 12 people on a postgraduate diploma in cancer genetic and counseling, so that they understand about what are inherited risk, and also looking at the tumor. I did not mention about that. Somatic, that is, soma means tissue, the body. So somatic genetic testing. So you integrate all that and give advice for the patient, their follow-up, their treatment, as well as for the family members. So this will happen. But society is a much bigger issue. So I think what you are doing, Prasad, is very important. People should know about it. Despite the technical advances and counseling, what I'll narrate an example, which I never thought someone could think like that. There's a family, 3 or 4 generations. They live in a suburb, in suburbs of Greater Mumbai. They're not just suburbs, but they have villages also near Mumbai. So they all live in a village near Mumbai, and they all come to Tata Hospital in a big family. We have found a BRCA mutation. So they one day they said, "Ki, sir, you come to our village and give a lecture." I was very curious. I said, all of you come here. Why should I go and give you a village? This is about hereditary cancers. I did not understand why they're saying that. And what they said, that really, made me think about it. I said, sir, it is happening in our family for last 50 years. We know if we come on time to Tata Hospital, our cancer is treated well, it is cured. Okay. If we don't come, then we know what happens. But what we can't bear when our children come back crying from school. I said, why would they come back crying from school? They said, because other parents tell their children, don't play or eat with children from this family in the village.
My
So
God.
other villagers have seen that, in the village, it's a small community. They have seen in this family every 4 or 5 years, some new case of cancer is happening, because you can make out someone is going through chemotherapy. And they are thinking that in this family, cancer is being transmitted from one person to other. And if our children will play with children in this family, they will also get cancer. So that is the, I'd never imagined that this could be an issue. So I think public awareness, okay, that is most important. This is one extreme. The other extreme is educated elite, like page three kind of people. And I was once in a fundraising event, when fundraising, all these women who have, whose husbands or they themselves have earned that much of money, you could, donate. So I was sitting in that, they knew that doctor from Tata Hospital, they were talking about it. And when anyone talks to me, sooner or later come to genetics or breast cancer, because I treat breast cancer and I do genetics. So I just asked them curious. I said, what do you think? What proportion of breast cancers could run in the family? They said, breast cancer means it will run in the family. So one lady said, then I asked someone else, she also said, both sides, they said, there were 10, 12. Almost everyone thought that if I have breast cancer, then my daughter or sister is at a very high risk of developing breast cancer. Some were even certain. Okay, I was quite so when they have read breast cancer may run in the family. So the may run, that means breast cancer runs in the family. So that little, it is not a nuanced thing also, it is so obvious. So I tell everyone only 5 to 10% of breast cancer, only 20 to 30% of ovarian cancers run in the family. The remaining are not hereditary. Just because your mother 40 years ago died of breast cancer or your aunt had this thing doesn't mean you will also get. So obviously then we go into the finer details, at what age she got breast cancer, was in one breast or both breasts and everything else. So from on one extreme where the villagers think that it can be passed on by just by playing or eating, to the other extent where they're almost certain that because breast cancer is always hereditary. So in between there's a huge gap. So people know heredity just because by common sense. You don't have to teach them what is heredity. They have to understand the hereditary elements of cancer. And I talked about only breast cancer and colon cancer and uterus cancer. Any cancer could be hereditary. Okay, a lot of hereditary knowledge we started with cancer in the children. The children unfortunately can develop cancer in the eye. It is known as retinoblastoma. There is retina in the eye, the back of the eye, and cancer can develop. So it started with that. Some more than 50 years ago, there are many other cancers. So any cancer could be hereditary. If anyone suspects that the cancer could be hereditary, they should ask. And if the doctor is not able to answer, because it's an evolving field. I mean, in medicine, we have to learn so much. One life is insufficient for any doctor to learn everything in medicine. And in oncology
Absolutely.
also, it has become so vast. So you should ask if that hospital has genetic clinic, then you should ask for that, and then go by the advice.
Indeed. This has been such an enriching discussion, Dr. Sarin, and I'm also learning so many new aspects of this. Even as an oncologist, there is so much for us to do and learn from you. So, thank you very much for this lovely conversation about the hereditary cancers. And I think the take home message for our patients would be to just probably look at your family history,
Yeah.
talk to your oncologist, and if you need to do the test, do the test. And especially even if there is family history, there's a possibility that you may be negative, and actually doing the test can lift that burden off your chest. And if you do have a genetic mutation, then there are ways in which the doctors can help you
That
to
is true.
sometimes prevent, but many times detect early
Yeah.
and treat it completely. So, important conversation, Dr. Sarin, and thank you very much for sparing your time
I'll add one
to
more
do
thing,
this.
Prasad, before I end. We're talking about testing. Counseling is as important, sometimes more important.
Yeah.
At the end of counseling, genetic testing may not be advised. If anyone, if you have doubts, don't just do Google, okay? Because you'll be lost. There's so many things. You ask for genetic counseling, and at the end of it, a lot of questions will be answered, and then you may or may not require genetic testing. So thank you. I hope people will, take home message. What you summarize is very apt. And from here we start. Ultimately, it's the public who have to understand, internalize, ask questions, pose questions, and then we move forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarin. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you find today's episode informative. Please feel free to ask your questions in the comment section and we'll get back to you with the correct information. Please do like and subscribe to the channel. But more importantly, share this information with people you care about. Join me in this fight against cancer.